power plant.
Good point. You also mentioned internal conflict in Indonesia as a serious threat. Could it really be a threat to the unity of the country?
There are two kinds of internal conflicts that I think we need to pay attention to. Number one is, of course, the threats of secessionist, armed secessionist tendencies, in a number of areas. But likely now the problem in Aceh is actually is being resolved, because I don't see its complete resolution yet, because it can relapse, because in many conflicts, such as the conflict in Aceh, we have to wait like 5 to 7 years before we can, say for sure with the peace process, will continue. So the process is, is actually so far is quite encouraging. But there are also, problems in Papua, and also maybe in South Maluku. But the second, type of the internal conflict is my view, is more dangerous. Actually, is the communal violence. Because if the separatist conflict only threatens the territorial integrity of the country, then the communal conflicts threaten actually the social integrity of the nation, which is actually more important rather than a piece of land owned by a country. So this is, I think, is more dangerous, and then we need to pay more attention to actually resolve all these communal violence that we might have, and also prevent it in the future, because that's, in my view, the conflict that can really undermine the unity of the country as a whole.
What do you think is being done to address this problem?
So far, it's true that if government claim that they have done a lot in order to resolve the conflicts in Maluku, in Kalimantan, and also in other part of the country, such as in Poso. But I'm not sure whether this is the outcomes of a deliberate act of conflict resolution. So there is also a possibility that the people there actually already reach the conflict fatigue situations. That means the possibilities for another conflict to erupt are still there. So that's I think we need to look at other conditions that can actually create a space where people no longer need to resort to violence in addressing all the grievances that they have. That's what in my view the government has not done yet.
Let's talk about other non-traditional security threats. You mentioned infectious diseases like bird flu, which is happening in the region, and pollution. What is being done to address those problems?
Yeah, on the bird flu, I think there are a number of measures that has been carried out by the government. But the problem is really the lack of education, and also the levels of poverty, within the community. I think these two factors can actually make it very difficult, for the government and even for the international institutions, to help us, to address this kind of the problem, because the lack of understanding, about how this kind of threats, can actually multiply in a very short time, is really put us, right there in the spot, under the international, community, a watch. That Indonesia, might be the source, for the new strains of these infectious diseases, such as the bird flu. And now I think we are the country where the largest number of victims of bird flu is to be found. And in fact, the way we address this problem is quite isolated. We only treat the problem of the bird flu per se, while in fact, actually the occurrence of the bird flu or other infectious diseases is actually much wider than that. So prevention side is still very weak, but we focus on dealing with, the problems, per se. So that's, I think, we need to also change, so we need also to look at, the preventive sides, of all measures that, should be taken.
Prevention, I think, is also lacking in how the pollution problem is being dealt with.
Yes, Indonesia is actually one of the countries where all kind of rules and regulations, basically exist. And the problem is really, despite all of the rules, still, the problems, actually occurs. So the problem of implementation. That has been stressed, many times, by a lot of people. But still, we actually still, face the same problem and the same questions. this issue of the pollution, especially the pollution generated by the forest fire, is actually also linked to the wider corporate interests of the state and also of the business community. I'm not sure if we can actually just blame the people for burning the forest. Not to mention about, of course, the lack of capacity in order to deal with the forest fire, and the legal uncertainty, the lack of law enforcement is also part of the problem. So it's not only in that area of the haze or the forest fire and so on, but almost across the board in the country. So if we talk about all these issues, and actually it's very easy for us to be actually frustrated by the level of lack of attentions given by both the government and also the lack of public pressure in order for the government to actually do more.
You have also been involved in efforts to reform the military in Indonesia, such as participating in drafting the 2002 defense law.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, is the military now democratized?
If we can use a scale from 0 to 10, I think what we have done so far from 1999 actually to push the reform from 0 to 6. The challenge is now basically how you push from 6 to 10. That's the ideal conditions. We started the military reform actually with only one agenda, how to push for military withdrawal from politics. So that's, in my view, we have achieved it by 2004. And we already have a number of regulations and laws that actually forbid the military to get involved in politics. And in fact, during the election in 2004, the military managed to demonstrate that they are actually neutral in the elections and so on. So in that context, the issue of military and politics and the reform of the military in that context actually has been resolved. We have achieved something very significant in my view. Now the agenda is basically to push for what I call as defense reform, because you can't have a professional military unless you professionalize also defense planning, defense programming, and also defense budgeting, because this all will lead to the good governance in the defense sector. So we have not done much in that area, even though now we still try to resolve the problems of military's involvement in businesses. But all these defense reform agenda are still on the paper. So the current government has not actually moved so very far in order to push the military reform from 6 to 10. So we focus too much on military's role in politics, which in my view has been achieved so far.
Well, we're glad to hear that. So the military, it now remains to focus the attention on the business side of the military.
Yes, not business, in the sense that they're doing business. I think many of the companies actually already went bankrupt, and then the remaining number of companies are being taken over, by the government, because that's the mandate given by the Armed Forces Law number 34 in 2004. Now the Minister of Defense is actually trying to come up with a new defense-wide paper, where they try to actually provide visions for a defense proper role that the military should take in the future. So they are still in the process of discussing this with the parliaments, and also they are doing the public consultation. So that's, I see as very positive signals that the government actually is serious also in order to bring about more reform to the military, even though two crucial issues have not been resolved so far. Number one is, of course, the culture of impunity. So until today, the culture of impunity within the armed forces has not been actually resolved. And second is basically the issue of the territorial command structures. So that's actually make it difficult for Indonesia to have a truly professional armed forces, because they still interact with the local governments and also interact with the society at that local level. So unless we address these two problems, so the reform of the military will be stuck somewhere between 6 and 10. So we'll never be under the 10s. Not to mention about the fact that in addition to Burma, Indonesia is the other country where the armed forces is still not under the Ministry of Defense.
Wow. All right. So you have still a lot more work to go.
Still a lot more works with the military reform.